To Talk Recovery Radio. You're listening to us live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, powered by Last Hour Recovery Center and New West Recovery. And we had a great earlier guest, Candace Platter, author of Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself. She's giving a 1-hour consultation for a family member of an addict. Go to her Facebook Live show, which is on our page too, and like or comment, and you can be entered into that contest. And we always finish off our show with a personal story of recovery and trying to shed some light and some hope during this overdose crisis right at Columbia and Hastings at the Co-op radio station. And today's personal story is Scotty D. Hello,
hey,
Scotty.
Hi,
Scotty. Yay! Welcome to Top Recovery.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
We just need to get you a bit closer to the microphone for those listening to us on the radio.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, you got a great radio voice. Okay,
go.
Scott. So we always like to start off with a little bit of what it was like, so some of the people watching and listening can kind of hear what your story is.
Sure, yeah. As I was driving over here, I couldn't help but take a look at the weather and, sort of reminisce, if you will, about what it was like. I remember days like today, drizzling, a little bit of wind, super cold, super soaking wet, walking for hours and can't possibly take that next step. My feet are sore, my legs are sore, and just having nowhere to go and having no other choice but to keep going, right? And that's essentially where my addiction took me, is I had nowhere to go and none of that self-respect that Candace was talking about. I had nothing left in me to give to myself or to anybody else around me, right? Backing up a bit, I came from a good home. I was provided a lot, and just some family dynamics, and there's a lot that kind of happened, and I kind of turned to my first drug, which was alcohol. At the time was my first drug. I turned to that when I was 12 years old, and it made me feel like the problems went away. It made me feel like everything was okay for that 1 minute, that 5 minutes, whatever it was. And I was able to, kind of escape everything that was going on. That addiction from alcohol quickly moved into other substances, moved into riskier behaviors quite quickly. And I actually ended up in my first treatment center when I was 15 years old.
15, eh?
Yeah.
How many times did you go to treatment?
Just the twice.
Just the twice?
Just the twice. So once when I was 15, that cured me from my drug of choice, so to speak, even though my drug of choice was really more by the end of it. That continued me forward. For a long time, I slipped back to alcoholism for a long period, and then experimented with other drugs, and eventually made it right back to, my drug of choice, and working a full-time job, had a car, had a home. People would call that a functioning addict. I don't think there's anything functioning about a guy that's so broken down inside that before he walks into his store, he needs to go to the employee washroom and, use before going to work, right? Mm-hmm. And I was that broken down shell of a person that once existed.
How much time do you have in recovery now?
I just celebrated 4 years on December 9th.
Yeah. 4 years, congratulations.
Thank you.
So you're not 20.
No.
So that means there's a couple of years from 15 to 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So what was it 4 years ago that got you, was it treatment 4 years ago?
Yeah, so in the midst of that, walking around not having anywhere to go, and a number of people trying to help me out, and I was pushing them away like Candace was talking about, I wasn't ready, and a number of things actually happened for me in a short period of time, a few months. One was a major health scare, another was homelessness, and another was being arrested by the police a number of times. And that kind of gave me the push that I needed to consider other options. And I wasn't really sure what that would look like. So I reached out to a friend who I knew was clean, and I asked him kind of what was going on. And by the sheer possibility of one addict helping another, he was able to help me out and get me in touch with a phone number of a place that I called. And, you know, some great memories from that facility, you know.
So, what, in your eyes, what's treatment? Because treatment now has changed to, you know, 3 clean opioid pills a day is now called treatment. So what was treatment for you?
Well, you know, I think we need to be careful about mixing recovery with harm reduction. While they are both great models, and I work in a harm reduction model for my work, you know, they are separate models, but they do need to, I believe, collaborate more frequently and work together more frequently instead of being separate. But when talking about treatment in particular, or treatment for my my addiction and seeking recovery in that, treatment to me at the time looked like a 12-step program. It also looked like smart recovery. It also looked like what I call social inclusion. And that's a big aspect, I think, for me, was the social inclusion. Exactly.
So were you in a facility, like you lived in a facility for
6 months.
6 months.
So I went from a primary core program of 30 days, moved on to sort of a mix between second stage and core program for another 30 days. And then for another 4 months on top of that, I lived in a second stage housing.
Okay. So now there is the concept of, from when you were 15 to 4 years ago, if you read the comments on Facebook about the whole addiction world and addiction treatment, a lot of people are just like, let them die, it's their decisions. I mean, a very common thread is survival of the fittest, this is just nature's way of whatever, you know, that whole theory is. So from 15 to 4 years ago, you know, those weren't failures.
No.
Those were just you getting to where you're going. Did you participate in harm reduction during that time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you, when people say harm reduction kept you alive, what's your thoughts on that?
Geez, I mean, harm reduction has changed immensely even since then, but you know, for me, harm reduction was being given an opportunity to participate in safer practices. You know, when you look at the chaos of that addiction can manifest, you know, and that lack of self-respect, you really don't care about yourself or anybody else. And you know, some of the different models that harm reduction provided for me, you know, such as safe injection and safe using and things like that, you know, those are the types of things that did keep me alive. Those are the types of things that kept me from doing more damage that I really could have cared less if I had participated in those things.
Mm-hmm. So what is it that gets somebody like you to make that decision 4 years ago to get clean and sober, and then the other person that's just, no, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm just going to, you know, go to the heroin clinic, I'm going to go to the methadone clinic, I'm going to go to the food line, I'm going to do, you know, whatever it is. You know, how you work in the downtown east side. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the protocol is where you work. You work at
Lookout Society.
Lookout Society. So is there, how do you inspire people to do what you've done?
Yeah, so it's conversation and finding out what their wants are first. Some people are not ready for that, like I wasn't between the ages of 15 and 27.
Yeah.
So I just aged quite exponentially.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, good.
75. Wow, you look great.
Thank you. You know, and I think that actually speaks to what Candace was saying when she said, you know, I don't work with addicts until they're ready to work with me, because you can put that effort in to work with somebody and you can make suggestions, but at the end of the day, it is their choice and their decision to be able to take on those suggestions and take on those responsibilities. And so one of the ways that I do that in my personal life at work is I use my personal story a lot to kind of educate people about where I've come from. The shelter that I'm currently working at, I was actually a client at once upon a time, and I like to throw that out every once in a while. Like, hey, I've actually been on your side of the counter, and that's my bed, and you're just renting space for me, and like I kind of joke with them about it, but it makes them feel confident enough in me to, probe for more questions. And we've got a lot of people who ask about recovery, not, it's not survival of the fittest. People don't want to be down here for the most part. They don't want to be in that lifestyle, and sometimes they just need a couple of steps to get them along that way. Sometimes they do, and that's okay too.
So you're right on the front line. So somebody comes to you at your shelter and you tell them your personal story, and there's that moment. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, I want to try. What are some of the barriers to get that person to where you're at?
Oh, geez. Willingness is, or I think we were talking about reservations in a sense earlier, so sort of that self-doubt and that self-belief and creating that empowerment inside that person to believe like, hey, you are worth this, you can do this. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about how he doesn't believe that any person is so hopeless or desperate and that's what drives them into recovery. He says what he thinks happens is people, even on a subconscious level, recognize the power within themselves and a state that they remember once upon a time that they want to restore themselves to. And it's about finding that spot within yourself.
What are some of the things you do today to stay clean?
I attend meetings. I actively participate in social networks. Like I said, social inclusion is a big thing for me. I have lots of friends. I have a sponsor. I'm going to be doing a set of steps again shortly. The little suggestions and the big suggestions. I think things go so far beyond the 12 steps though, and a lot of people get caught up in just the 12 steps. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a big proprietor for everything that goes beyond the 12 steps, emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, and the things that need to be done for that. If yoga is good for your spiritual and mental well-being, then do that if that's what lifts you up and gives you purpose. And just having a purpose, having a direction. And I've said it million times before, and I'll say it again, addicts, in my observation, in my opinion, are more often than not more dedicated, more motivated to achieving goals, and we go far beyond what any or most normies can achieve because we know what it's like.
is a pretty, and it's not cheap, and it's, you need to be crafty to get your fix every day.
I think more so than that, our determination not to go back to that state once we have found recovery, right? And that's the key, right?
So we just got through Christmas. New Year's Eve is around the corner. What does recovery mean to you now that you've done your fourth Christmas clean?
Yeah, Christmas to me is family. It's more of that inclusion, in my addiction, I actually spent 5 years not talking to my family whatsoever. I thought it was easier not to talk to them than to tell them the truth, right? And I remember that phone call where I said, I called up my mom who lives in the States. I called her up and she was in tears. She didn't know if I was alive or if I was dead, if I was dealing drugs or what I was doing. And she was just so relieved to hear my voice. And when I told her everything else that was going on, it didn't matter. And so that family aspect, and not just blood family too. Like, you know, I have the ability to choose my extended family, and I've got a lot of family out there.
It's such a cool thing too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just so fortunate. We've got, you know, every 7 days a week, 4 times a day, you can go to a meeting and just get immersed into all these people, and it's such a special opportunity that we get to do when we're in recovery. But you touched on something. You took 5 years, and you called your mom, and myself included, I made that phone call too. I didn't talk to my family for years as well, and just insane resentments, which had no, I can't even remember anymore. But back then, it was like, I was so mad at everybody. Yeah. But it's interesting how we create such a wall surrounding us, like a brick concrete wall, that, and then just one phone call, and it's like,
it all comes down.
It all comes down. It's just like healing and forgiveness is so easy when you actually do it.
That's right. Yeah, and you know, being able to reach out and mend some of those bridges, if you will, and to be able to draw the people that are close to me back in has been such a healing environment for me. You know, I'm real close with my mom, even though she lives in Florida. I talk to her probably 5-6 times a week at least.
Oh wow!
My sister lives in Richmond with her beautiful nephews who. Or my beautiful nephews who, you know, I missed the early part of their development, and so I'm just so involved. I got to go to their Christmas concert this year, and it was amazing, you know, and I was there with my mom and my stepdad and my sister and her husband. And
isn't it interesting how when we talk about addiction, it's always about drugs, but when we talk about recovery, it's all about family, love, people, community. It's the irony of the opposite.
It's a realization, for me, it's a realization of the things that I missed and I took so for granted. And just the ability to have those things, like, it means the world. Like the basic necessities. I used to wake up every morning in that treatment center bed, and I used to look up at the ceiling and I used to say, thank you for this roof, thank you for this bed. Just like the little things that I didn't have for so long, and your gratitude goes through the roof, right?
Mm-hmm. So the new concept today kind of being official now, they're going to have the opportunity of giving people with substance use disorder 3 heroin pills a day. What's your thoughts about that? You know, we're almost out of time here. Just thought we'd throw in one more question.
Sure. A good one too. Tough one. You know what? I am a huge supporter of harm reduction. We're no stranger to what's going on with people with overdose deaths, and the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, they're people. Yeah. And my heart breaks anytime I read some of those threads that you were talking about. You know, that it's a choice, it's survival of the fittest, and these are real people that we're talking about. And if people had given up on me, I wouldn't be here sharing my story with you today.
Do you ever think that, because in the beginning you said, you know, you were homeless, you got arrested, you had a health concern, those were some of the motivators for you to get clean.
Right.
That was 4 years ago. In the last 4 years, Housing First has been given tons of money.
Right.
So there's lots of housing available for people with substance use disorder. They want to decriminalize. They want to... I saw you squint there. You don't have to agree with me. You can say, no, you're wrong, Giuseppe. So once we start taking some of these things away that motivate our stories of recovery, do you have any fear that, maybe... I heard somebody say the other day I got clean at the wrong time.
That's an interesting... When is the right time? He's
time? Like, they're giving out free heroin. I got clean at the wrong time. Like, there was actually that little whisper in the back of his mind. It's just, you know?
Well, hey, so, I mean, very quickly, the reason why I winced is because I try to find people housing on a daily basis. I'm a caseworker. Yeah. So if you know of some housing, please let me know. Because I got lots of people that
Francis
I need to
has a 3-bedroom home.
There you go. $375 a month.
Yeah.
You know, and as far as what's going on with you know, opioids being approved, you know, if it will help reduce some of the deaths. I don't know about you, Giuseppe, or anybody else that's listening, but I have lost a lot of people this year alone. And I think as people in recovery, we tend to hear a lot about it because there is a lot of people who unfortunately go back and they end up relapsing because their tolerance is low. They end up overdosing and passing away. And if there is a solution that could possibly work to assist people who are not quite at the door yet, but they're maybe 5 steps away, let's get them to that door.
Yeah, definitely. You missed the very beginning. We were talking about this, and we agree too. I mean, I think anything that can help somebody will help somebody. I just want to make sure the message of recovery doesn't get lost in the continuum of care, because you deserved it, I deserve it, Francis deserved it, and the addict still suffering still deserves a physician saying, you know what, here's 3 heroin pills, but hey, if you want to get clean, that works too.
For sure.
And I think we've lost the second part of that conversation. So we want to, that's what we do at Talk Recovery. We try to encourage recovery conversations in the conversation of harm reduction, because it needs to be there. Great story, Scott. Thank you so much for being on the show. Yeah, we really appreciate it. And you can catch us on SoundCloud. You can catch us on iTunes as well. And you can also go to our website, talkrecoveryradio.com. We come to you live from the downtown east side every Thursday. And this is Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, powered by Last Door. And we're going to finish off with a song picked by Francis. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great new year. And if you need something to do in recovery, there is the West Coast area New Year's Eve dance taking place at the Roundhouse, which is located here in Yaletown. It's, I think, the 7th party they've done. And you can check that out on New Year's Eve. I think it's $35 a ticket. And you can get your tickets. Thanks for watching.
Have a safe New Year's, guys.